morning, everyone. I'm in my studio in Parker, Colorado, and I'm going to demo today my use of field work and photo reference for creating a painting in the studio. A lot of my work is based on many experiences being in the field, painting numerous times from life. One of my favorite places to go here in Colorado is Rocky Mountain National Park. So the scene I chose to paint for you today is this landscape. It's a winter stream. It's called Fall River. It's in the Fall River Valley at Rocky Mountain National Park. So I chose that for you. It's one of my favorite spots of all time. I wanted to talk about my work indoors. I've been a plein air painter for years, and I find that to be an invaluable way of working. It's led me to come up with colors I would have never imagined. I can explore the world with my own eyes, and I can get essentially all the senses are touched when I'm outdoors. I'm feeling, I'm smelling, I'm looking. I can feel the cold day, I can feel the breeze blowing through, I can smell the scents of the day, and that all gets into my field work. When I come indoors, essentially what I'm doing is I'm trying to enhance that experience. I'll take my field works, what I've tried to capture on the spot, and I'll look at them and I'll say, how can I express that feeling to the viewer much more profoundly? I often take photos when I'm out painting on location. I'll compose, looking through the viewfinder, trying to make compositions that work. What I'm going to do here is, I think I'm going to work on this vertical scene. I included both a horizontal scene and some black and whites. I'll do this often. I'll take a color photo with my digital camera. I'll have it printed. And I like to work off prints. That's the way I started, so I'm used to it. Now the photo, I look at it as this is sort of the imperfect material. It's not at all useful as it is. There's values and lines I think kind of help guide me, but I need to change them, and that's based more on what I've done in the field and my memories of the field, from the field. So I'm just using the general idea. It's almost like just a reminder. It's not the thing itself. It's a reminder of what that place. It takes me back to that place, and I can toy with, again, color and value based on my memory and based on what I've done in the past with my field works. Got a full arrangement of colors, something I don't have the luxury of having these colors out in the field. Typically, I have about 150 colors in the field, and then in the studio, it's much more elaborate. There's probably closer to 500 colors here. So my range of value and color choices is much broader in the studio. So I'm happy to share my palette here. It's kind of arranged the same way as my field box, just kind of elaborated on. I typically like to start a drawing using a Conte crayon. This is the Bistra color. So let me move these sketches aside. I'm going to keep, what I like to do is I keep them within view when I'm in the studio because I refer to them. I find them invaluable, so I like to kind of look through them. I've got other sketches that are kind of out of your view, but essentially things that I have done in the past. Anything I can kind of use to help guide this painting, I'll use it. So one of the things I typically look for are the big shapes. So if I can show you here, this helps to take a color photo and put it into black and white. It allows me to see some of the big value changes in a more of a graphic way. So I'm trying to take that feeling back to what it felt like to be on the spot. And that's my main goal with my studio works. This helps essentially give me details that I might not be able to capture out in location. It gives me some ideas for lines and shapes, but it's just ideas. So what I like to do with the Conte is start to just kind of block in. Now, occasionally what I'll do is a small little thumbnail sketch. In this case, I'm just going to go for it. You know, I feel comfortable with the subject. I've painted it many times. You know, the shapes essentially are fairly simple, and so I'm just going to go for it and not do that thumbnail. And I find it exciting to kind of just start laying in lines. So you could see right now at this initial point, I'm sort of finding my way around the surface. This is a piece of Canson moonstone. I've now also marked some lines here to make the dimension a 20 by 16. You know, considering these 4 lines are my most important lines, everything else I put here, I want to look at variety of shapes. I want to see uniqueness of sizes. So I'm very careful about where lines come out of the painting, what the different dimensions are, what the different size shapes are. So like here's a shape here that's larger than this shape here. You know, this shape is bigger than this shape. So I'm trying to be careful that I'm not just copying what's there, but actually composing. So one of the things I enjoy here is there's a line of the pines, and there's a little bit of this mountain peeking through way off in the distance. When you're walking to a site like this, often I see the hills or the mountains as I'm walking through, and I often think, boy, it's such a beautiful shape. It'd be wonderful to incorporate that. When I get to the actual spot, maybe it's hidden now. The trees are hiding it. So this is our chance to kind of use artistic license and bring it out, you know, make it more visible and create a much more interesting background for the viewer to go through. So the creek is going to lead me into the painting. It'll stop me here. I want the viewer to shoot up here and then shoot up through this area and then go to the distant mountain shape in the background. So that's essentially kind of the foundation of what I'm kind of conceiving here. Being a studio piece, you know, I don't have the time constraints that I do out in location. So I can really play with shapes and kind of consider the design, and I don't have to, you know, I don't have to fight the clock. You know, I essentially have the freedom of time, which one doesn't have out in the field, you know. So really allow yourself to take time with the design, make it work, not rush the stage. To me, this is the make it or break it stage. I've either got something that's going to work or it won't. So I want to, you know, allow myself the opportunity to kind of play with shapes here. So let's just kind of lightly, I'm using the side of the Conte crayon. If you can see that, I'm using it now as more of a painting tool instead of a linear tool. I'm just blocking in a big shape, and I'm trying to get that suggestion of the willows. Now, as I press a little harder, I'm indicating some of the darker values. So now the pines, let's just rough them in. This essentially is giving me the values that I want to look for. I can go over these values now with other colors, but it's essentially giving me the big, broad value shapes. I don't want to press too hard at this point because I anticipate other layers of pigment. I use this Vivid Tell in order to move the pigment. In essence, it kind of creates a stain of pigment. It's lifting some of the pigment off the paper and leaving just a stain, so it allows many more layers than I would get if I had left it as it is. So let's just knock this in here. Okay. And what I'm doing too at this point with the paper towel is not essentially just rubbing it in, but painting with it. So the mark making is, I'm using a variety of directions of strokes with this paper towel just to give me some texture as well. So it's doing a couple things for me. It's creating this value block in, but it's also creating textures that are already going to start to emulate what the textures are in nature. So quickly, I've just got my finger in the paper towel, just moving it around, picking the pigment up. I think of this stage very similar to if I was blocking in an oil painting and the brush had been dipped into turpenoid or turpentine, diluted, and it dilutes that thick pigment into more of a watery substance. In this case, this paper towel is not diluting it, but it's sort of knocking off some of the particles and just leaving a stain. Again, these are just reference. I'm not wanting to copy the trees as they are, but use them more as notes of darks. And I want the variety to be unique in each one. So I want to be very aware of not only the positive shapes of the trees, but the negative shapes within them. It's very important that we create variety. So now I've got more uniqueness within that negative shape. And that's important. More important than what's happening here in nature is what we do with the shapes and the design. And now, this is purely a drawing stage. What's beautiful about the pastel medium is that it's kind of, you're working with color, but you're drawing at the same time. So you have the benefit of both, drawing and painting simultaneously. That's one of the joys of this medium. So at this point, I'm just restating some of the dark shapes, kind of reanalyzing, where the major shapes are. When you squint at the colors of the willows compared to the trees, they almost blend. When I look at them with my eyes open, because there's a color change, it seems like two different shapes. But I've noticed when you sort of squint, it does sort of create one shape, and that's always better when you can simplify it down to one shape as opposed to 2 or 3 or 4 shapes. The painting will be that much stronger. So let's step back. I'm going to use the paper towel method again. Again, it's just a way of toning the paper. Using this approach, I found I get a lot better results if I move the pigment around and pretend I'm painting with this, creating marks that essentially move and dance as opposed to just rubbing it all in. You sort of get a flat, uninteresting shape. And I find I love texture in nature, and I love texture in painting, and so by moving it around in more of a kind of mark-making manner, I get more of the feeling of texture and more brushwork quality to it. So essentially, you almost got a kind of a dark light design. It gives me a chance to really kind of look at the contrast between the dark shapes and the light shapes. Especially winter has that contrast that I love so much. It's got a natural light and dark contrast. It's got a beautiful contrast of warm and cool color. But this stage really allows me to play up that idea. And when it's like this, when there's so much contrast, and you can obviously see the shapes, it becomes really paramount that that variety of the shapes is there, and that there's uniqueness to those shapes. So when I step back, the things I'm asking myself are the very things we've been talking about. I'm looking at the variety of the shapes, both in terms of the dark areas and the light areas. Essentially, I often do this in my workshops. I'll tell people to think about 3 simple shapes: a big shape, a middle-sized shape, and a small shape. And so you see it here. This white area is one bigger, this is a big white shape. This is sort of more mid-size or smaller, and this is even smaller. So there's 3 unique shapes there. Here in the lights, it's one shape, but I'm seeing now it's the trees. What is the variety of the width of those trees? And I'm seeing some similarities there. So I have to I'm putting that in my memory bank to just remember to say, okay, give this some variety before it's all said and done. Let's just work on this area. And sometimes that's all we need to do. What I find useful and very helpful is to go to those areas that could potentially become problem areas, and I want to address them first. Instead of saying, I'll wait, I'll figure it out later. Let's resolve it now. It just will make the painting process go much quicker and faster and be a lot more enjoyable. And at this stage, I still have room to come in and use a kneaded eraser to change shapes. And it's a great tool for the drawing stage. Once the pastel goes on there, it's not at all very useful. In fact, it'll just smudge the pastel. But at this stage, you can still sort of pull out the negative shapes.